You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 328th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it's our 1,022nd episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of March 7th, 2023. I am your host, the coach, Brian Tonsoni. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred last night when our Indiana Hoosiers won their third game in a row. Winning basketball is what we crave, and it's what's been absent for long stretches of time for the Hoosiers program. In this year where injuries, less than exciting wins, blowouts to top-level teams, and questions about everything from sub-patterns and shot selection, it was a banner moment just to forget about all that and enjoy a good old road Big Ten win. All right, enough of that. That's a banner moment, but we got a lot of stuff to talk about, and we're not sure we're going to get through it, so we brought our friends, and we're going to talk to you about some tough things that are going on in the Indiana basketball program. And before I go on, I just still encourage people to try to be as positive as possible about Indiana University in these times where weird things happen. So cheers to the 686 of you for being here tonight. Cheers for you being Indiana fans. And let's keep the faith and try to find a way for Indiana to win. Bottoms up.
Salud.
Salud.
All right. So Indiana did win 3 games. It's been good. They played some small ball. Coach Adranya did a nice job of showing a little bit of a small ball, even though they played 2 posts. They played Anthony Leo in the post. They got some threes. They got out in transition. That seems like maybe a little bit of change is in the air for how they play. And then we get hit with the Liam McNeely news, the decommit, about an hour and 45 minutes ago. And it just kind of smacked us all. So I'm not sure how we're going to go about it, but we are going to address it, and we are going to talk about it and try to talk about it honestly and as fairly as we possibly can because we wish Liam nothing but the best. We're going to stay away from the negativity to that young man. He has a right to ask for his release and go where he wants, and he has his decisions, and we can only speculate on that. And as well as people, sometimes we all do things in our job that don't work out. And so let's try everywhere in the chat and on our show tonight to be happy, sad, critical, whatever it is, but still be somewhat respectful. So not a great banner moment, but it is the news of the day. Liam McNeely, no longer going to be an Indiana Hoosier, wishes to decommit. There's all kinds of thoughts about style and what he's seen as the reasons why. We can read that, and we'll probably talk about some of that down the line. But I'm Coach Brian Tonsoni. I'm glad to be here with you. And so now let me introduce our co-host this week as we welcome the host of X's and Joe's, which is our newest show here on the Back Home Network. Outstanding podcast and outstanding information, and 2 guys that we really want on the show now to talk about where do we go. There's a lot of holes in the roster, some holes we don't know yet, but who better than to Bob and Mike to bring on a show like this. So first, a name and voice you'll recognize from his previous appearances on AC Radio and post-game shows. He has coached youth basketball for 24 years in the Columbus, Indiana area, and most recently in the Columbus Revolution program. He is also the only true challenger to Galen Clavio for the title of Analogy King at the Back Home Network. It's Bob Moats. Bob, what's on your mind tonight about Indiana basketball?
Yeah. What's on my mind is it's kind of like we're looking at we're looking at March coming into play and 3-game winning streak, and we're not really sure where it's kind of like we're not really sure. We don't know where we're going, and we're sure look like, and we're not going anywhere in a hurry. And that was kind of my thought earlier, as old Steve Goodman song. Yeah, that kind of hits that. The team is playing better. Let's start there. Offensively and defensively, they're finally clicking to a certain degree. You're seeing, you are seeing some good individual and team efforts out there on a night by night basis. Khalil Ware has turned into probably one of the best overall portal stories that you could think of over the last, definitely in the last 3 seasons. Makambako has, started off really rough as a freshman, has improved pretty much every game. I thought from the get-go this kid would be potential Big Ten freshman of the year, and now he's played himself into the conversation. Not on Owen Freeman by any stretch of the imagination, but the kid is jumping, has kind of jumped in those areas. So, I mean, you look at kind of how this team is coming together a little bit. It's nice to see him win a little more than what we were used to seeing. But it still has a feeling of a hard candy Christmas around here, guys.
Also joining us, it's Bob's longtime friend, fellow history buff, verbal sparring partner, also co-host of the X's and Joe's podcast. He lurked in the shadows of IU message board for a long time as IU in Philly, posting some of the most insightful research-based analysis on recruiting that you will find anywhere, and we're going to need that tonight. It's Mike Wiemuth. Mike, welcome to the show on a crazy night. Your thoughts about Indiana basketball?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Coach. And I feel like one of those NTSB investigators that gets dragged onto network TV after some god-awful train wreck. So, but I must confess, I am a sucker for crossover shows. So I do hope that, in the future that this could be like the Jetsons and Flintstones meetup show for the future on the Back Home Network catalog. So that would be a lot of fun. Go
ahead.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'll second everything Bob said. I think, you always, in these sort of situations, you have like 2 sort of narratives going on at the same time. You have everything that's going on with, let's say, coaching, and everything that's going on with the team, the actual players. I think it's important for fans to always remember that you can have a nuanced take on both that do not have to be necessarily connected. You can have an opinion about what's going on, the larger macro issues in the program, but still cheer for the kids and be happy for the kids actually, achieving and doing good things for the program and representing IU well. So I am happy to see that they're winning and doing better, because that is a great thing for those kids that, have put in the time and effort to try to win games for Indiana. As far as the rest of the stuff, it's March. I'm happy about that. The good thing is that because so much of the research I do is not just related to IU, I mean, I'm always looking at all of college basketball, so I can actually enjoy the tournament on its own terms without it being related to, my alma mater. So yeah, it is fun just realizing how much different types of basketball are going on. It's fun, like having several games on at once, during the conference tournament time and the dance itself. And I just love seeing, like, on message boards, the reactions of, like, people seeing different types of basketball. Like a third of the typical posts you'll see around this time of year is like, God, I wish our team could do that. As teams that are left out of the tournament, then their fans have to, like, watch the different teams that are actually making it. So it's just funny, like, wait a minute, 4 guards? Is that even allowed? So yeah, I'm enjoying all that kind of stuff right now. So it's good, and I've got a trip scheduled another like 2 weeks to visit some friends for the first round. So it's all good.
Good. Here's what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, there's one major headline. We're going to get to that a lot in segment 2. Segment 1, any comments about that 3-game winning streak? Linger a little bit on Minnesota. You have Michigan State coming up. You have the Big Ten tournament. We have some games coming up. We can talk about that here at the back end of segment 1. Segment 2, we're going to be in what's next for Mike Woodson and the roster. We got the news on Tuesday that Coach Woodson would be back. We got the news or on Wednesday, and then tonight we get the news that the top recruit, the only recruit in 2024, is let go, and that's just tough news for us Indiana fans. It's tough news for Coach Woodson and his staff. And Bob and Mike will give us their best X's and Joe's ideas on how to build a roster in this situation and where to go. And maybe we'll obviously talk about the ramifications of this decommit. Section 3, we have some excellent questions. Most of the questions are about open scholarships and roster and that we'll try to get into here in segment 2. All of that is coming up here on Assembly Call Radio. But now it's time to talk about our presenting sponsor.
Home field apparel, wear one for the team.
This edition of Assembly Call Radio, just like all shows on the Back Home Network, is presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel, where they have the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you'll find anywhere. And right now they have something truly special going on for March. It's their third month Mania release schedule. We're only on the 7th day of March, and they've already released some jaw-dropping items like the Phi Slamma Jamma shooting shirt, which is going to take a lot for me not to order, and vintage UConn jersey. And there's much more coming, including basketball tee bonanza, more jerseys coming, retro jerseys, shooting shirts and hats, and so much more. No one can ever accuse Home Field of resting on their laurels. They're always pushing the envelope and finding new ways to celebrate college sports and other sports with vintage apparel that fans love. And no matter what you buy, you know it'll be comfortable. The colors will last through many washings. Plus, you're supporting an Indiana-based company that came up through the Kelley School of Business. What else could be better than that? I simply have to take breaks, fellas, from the Home Field site. It's just absolutely an addiction for a guy who likes to collect college gear and always has since I've been in high school. They are the death of me, Connor. Thanks a lot. So anyway, go to homefieldapparel.com. Buy your favorite podcast host, who also goes by the name of Coach Tonsoni, something. You can send it to my address directly from homefieldapparel.com. Use our promo code HOME23 for 15% off that entire first order for Coach Tonsoni. Again, that's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All right, as we talked about, and we will mention it here because it's important, Indiana has played some decent basketball the last 3 games, beating Wisconsin, beating Maryland, beating Minnesota, and playing some ball and hitting some threes and playing a little bit loose. I think the guys are playing loose for whatever reason that is. There has to be some accolades given to the staff, the players, for finding that late in the season. I think that's important, and you guys touched on several of that. Big game coming up against Michigan State, senior night, or afternoon at Assembly Hall. So we hope that everyone goes out on a winning nature. At the 4-game winning streak would be nice to end the year and go into the Big Ten tournament. Mike, your thoughts a little bit on how this winning streak has happened and what it means for this particular team right now headed into the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, Coach, I do think that I would agree with you. They seem less like they're stuck on a train track in terms of their offense. Like you see a lot more like free flow and mobility. You don't feel like they're just like running a script like they have so many times throughout, big chunks of this year, especially the early part of the Big Ten season. So yeah, I don't know how much of that is maybe Xavier Johnson giving back a little bit, maybe like giving some rest to Cups. Maybe sometimes if you just add one player, sometimes it can change the whole dynamic of a team and the whole balance. And I've long theorized that one of the biggest problems that IU's had this year is the sort of like productivity disbalance between the backcourt and the front court. So as far as like what it means going forward, into the tournament, it's usually obviously a better case to be having some momentum going into the Big Ten tournament than having the opposite of it. It's impressive that I would say that the Minnesota game was particularly good because that was one team that was actually reasonably hot, or at least like playing a little bit above, where their baseline was. Because frankly, Maryland and Minnesota both were, I think, 2-7 since February 1st when.
Wisconsin.
Well, Wisconsin, right. Sorry.
Yeah.
So with Minnesota, they can get really, really hot. luckily, IU held them to like 19% from three on 26 attempts. And if you could do that against them, they're pretty much cooked, because when they do get hot, they almost beat Purdue at Purdue. They almost beat Illinois at Illinois because they could put up some really big numbers. So good for IU to be able to put together and string together some wins as you're going into a tournament where you actually have to do string together wins to get anywhere. So
one thing that I think has been missed by me, we focus on the offense all the time and the lack of threes, but Indiana had been connected defensively, especially in the second halves when they needed to win games against Wisconsin. Down against Maryland, was able to really put the screws on Maryland, and then, as you said, a complete game of defense, and so it just seems better. Some of that is Xavier Johnson coming back and putting pressure on the ball, but some of that is also just collective defensive awareness has been a lot better. Bob, what have you seen in this three-game winning streak, and what do you think it means for Indiana going forward into the Big Ten tournament if they should be able to continue that against Michigan State?
So I think the first thing is, we've been living in a narrative where this is a post-up team, and that they depend on getting points from Ware and Renew Malik on the blocks, to the point where it's almost just predictable. And when you look at the last three games per synergy on post-ups versus Wisconsin, they scored 10 out of the post out of 70 points. Against Minnesota last night, they scored 10. Against Maryland, they didn't get the baskets didn't come out of, their points scored didn't come out of the post. They got 38, and so in the Maryland game, they got 38 points in transition. In the Minnesota game, they got 20 points off cuts. They're finding different actions in their flow, and I use their flow. The sets, we know what the sets are, and at this point in the season, everyone knows what your sets are, and they also know how to defend pretty much every action, whether it's pick and roll ball handler, or pick and pop, pick and short roll, any of those two-man game, handoff, including zoom actions. They know how to handle your pistols action. Whatever you guys are running, teams have seen enough of it, and they prepared against enough of it that they now know how to defend it. Because you're 30 games in the season? So at this point, if you're not connected, well, then you're Pacific earlier tonight, who was down, I think, 56-9 at the half. Arguably, so I always like to think there was a great piece of a literary masterpiece that I had as a child, because could be worse, with Grandpa telling his kids a story about how life could be worse, and a fantastic dream. It's one of those deals where it could be worse, but taking that aside, they're finding different ways to score, and I think you're right about the connectivity on defense. They're doing much better at communicating, containing ball handlers, at just rotating when they need to rotate, switching when they need to switch. And you saw it again last night. That you can say, well, Minnesota had an off shooting night. Probably true, but it also oftentimes it's your defensive pressure and how you're honestly disrupting. And you got to give Xavier Johnson a lot of credit for that too. Him getting out on ball handlers. Gabe Cupps is good at it. Trey Galloway is good at it. Xavier Johnson is particularly good at it. And even if XJ doesn't have a great offensive night, which last night you could argue that from a production standpoint it really wasn't there. Him being as disruptive as he is makes a huge difference, and and that is a mitigating factor for this season. When you look at this season as when you look at the balance of the season, which we'll probably be doing in about 3 weeks, those two injuries to Xavier Johnson did make an impact. It's not the whole story, and I would never argue it's the whole story, but having that, not just for leadership, but just having that impact type of player versus having, again, a freshman who's just starting, or Anthony Leal trying to do some of those types of things, which he's done well in many situations, but it's just not the same thing. It's not the same thing as having that presence on the floor.
The other thing that I want to mention here before we get into the meat of the show, it's Trey Galloway distributing the basketball. He's about ready to set the assist record, I think, for a single season. And you've seen Indiana play better when his assist numbers skyrocket. And he's incorporating other players when they're open and started trying to make the hero play in between two people at the rim or throw something up. He's taking the floater when it's there. I think his ball handling and execution of the point guard position, they even put X and Cupps off the ball now because he's playing so well. That coupled with transition baskets and the ability, we've talked all along on the show all year about catching and shooting and being ready to shoot, whether you're in transition or a half-court set or whatever, instead of just catching with solely the idea of going inside. They are now at least been freed up for whatever reason to be able to catch and shoot, especially Mbako has been incredible. He's not hesitating. He's not worrying. He's playing basketball. So a little bit of positivity on the court right now. And let me answer this last thing before we go into a sec. Go ahead, Bob.
Real coach. And I would just want to say, Brian, I think you and I are both members of the Recovering Motion Coaches of America Anonymous group.
Yes, we are.
That we kind of had, because that's how we grew up and kind of what we first started running, and we've been working ever since. How much, just off, from where you guys are sitting, how much of this do you think he's getting off of flow, and how much do you think he's getting off of design actions?
I would say a lot of the ATO stuff, you can tell it seems like it's designed, but once you get later in the 4-minute segments, it seems more flow. At least that's what I see.
Yeah, I don't know that it looks like they're running different things to get going than they have in the past. But I think this team's just playing basketball when the drive's there. So we could be critical of Coach Woodson's heavy drive or whatever, the post up and the ball screen, but it's not really horrible basketball if you move the basketball, you have proper spacing. To me, it's always been the heavy repetition of it and the lack of variety more than it's bad basketball. It's not really bad basketball. It's bad basketball if you have told people, score over your guy, score over two guys, go make a play, or it's better to go score if you can, but share the basketball, share the sugar, Steve Lavin always said when he was a commentator, right? And I hate to bring this up, but the other night there was an interesting strategy by Illinois against Zach Edey. They drove at him to pass. They didn't drive at him to score. They drove at him and then tried to find angles where the crackdown and the help wasn't to try to get layups or dunks. Rogers got a couple, and that was shut down in the second half, and that's why Purdue was able to come out. But it was an interesting strategy by Illinois that you drove at a rim protector and tried to get him up in the air, and then you had guys just diving and cutting all over. And you could really tell they worked on, don't shoot it against Edey. Pass it against Edey. So bringing that back to IU, I think that they're driving and knowing where Mbako is on the backside of a ball screen action or the roll replace. They're really now looking for it as opposed to go make a play at the rim, go make a play at the rim, beat your man, beat your man. I think the emphasis has changed, whether that's coming from the coaching staff or the players are just saying, hey, this is what we're doing, or whatever combination of that is. It's obviously better. I'm going to ask at the last segment is – there is really little chance of NCAA tournament. I know winning 3 in a row is good, but you beat a Wisconsin team that's dropped 4 seeds, and you dropped Maryland and at Minnesota 2, barely a quad 1 win for Maryland, but you have to have good quality wins and a net that is not 95. And I appreciate all the IU fans who are hitting up Delphi Bracketology. What do they have to do? Who do we have to root for? Find some other team to root for because we're not going unless we make it to the Big Ten championship and win the Big Ten championship. It's just a mountain to climb. We've played better. We're winning. There's been a mountain to climb to get back in that at-large. What has happened on a positive note is we probably are back in the discussion for NIT. If you get up to 18, 19, 20 wins and you're not qualifying for the tournament, I don't think you'll automatically qualify. Now there's rules about being the top 2 net teams that don't get selected. I don't know that Indiana can move up there, but they will be an at-large bid to the NIT. I think that is a possibility, especially if you beat Michigan State, you win a game in the Big Ten. We could see some postseason basketball, and maybe that's a good thing to keep people, believing in what's going to happen next year and all those kinds of things. So coming up on Assembly Call Radio, we're going to talk about Mike Woodson and Liam McNeely and how to fix a roster that doesn't have anyone coming. So stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us. We got record numbers, over 4,000 people. So, Bob, make sure you're, happy and well, not happy, but at least, smiling. Good thing we have Mike on because you and I, Bob, have faces for radio, and if they're watching on social media, it's kind of they got tough news about Liam McNeely, and now they got to watch us too. Mike at least elevates the viewing,
Appreciate
nature
that.
of everything.
My mother will appreciate you saying that, Coach.
Yeah, it's just the truth,
Yeah. You kept your hair. I don't know how the hell you did that.
I still remember you with, something other than that arrangement there.
Man, I knew how to use the product. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. I had a perm once with the afro that a long time ago.
Is there photographic evidence of that?
I don't know. That might have been back before there was even cameras or anything, Mike. I'm so old.
There's a tintype somewhere of you with the.
Yeah. Maybe they was drawn on a cave somewhere. All right, fellas, here we go. I think we're going to start off. I will talk about your thoughts about the decommitment, and then I do like the two main topics we have on the run sheet is, okay, that happened. We've heard coaches coming back. It's happened. We have people who are happy about it, not happy about it. We have no idea what that means as far as the attitude about coaching or the athletic department. We don't know. It's not a good day, obviously, for Indiana when a player of that stature and leaves the program. But then we'll talk about, how do you go about doing it? What's the path to success? What's the difficulty in reaching there? And then just some overall, how do you use the portal going forward in an ideal world just in college basketball kind of stuff. And then we'll try to answer some questions in the third segment. So we'll see what happens. So, all right, here we go.
Hi, this is AJ Moye. What's the only thing better than upsetting Duke in the Sweet 16? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach for the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm the coach, Brian Tonsoni, here with Bob Moats and Mike Wiemuth from X's and Joe's, which you can subscribe to anywhere you listen to podcasts, and it's on our Back Home YouTube channel. Just excellent work, fellas. Proud to have you as part of the Back Home Network. And we have to discuss, we had the news that some of us were happy for on Wednesday, and some of us wished maybe there was another outcome, and that was Mike Woodson being announced that he will be coming back for a fourth year. And then, I was telling the guys before the show, I was ready maybe for a change, and I said that when we had the ABC conversation and the state of the program last week. And I have my reasons for it. And then all day long, I talked myself into rooting for Indiana and supporting the person who's coaching our program, whether I approved it or not, and what level of, attention I was going to pay to it, that kind of stuff. I finally got around to it's Indiana, and they deserve the support. And any young man who wears Indiana uniform, and I'd finally gotten to that spot in less than 24 hours. I was kind of proud of myself because of where I was at. And then all of a sudden, at about 7:15, the bombshell hits where Liam McNeely has asked out of his national letter of intent and wishing to reopen his recruitment, which is a huge blow to Coach Woodson and staff. Just the day before, they put out a social media praising his third-team All-American choice, type of player that I think Indiana fans really wanted to see and wanted to have. He had the ability to shoot the three, which is an area that Indiana badly needed, and now we're down one more. And so in a recruiting cycle of 2024, Boogie Fland says no, Liam McNeely says no, Derek McQueen says no, and you put a lot of time and effort and resources into shooting for the top, and the top has said no to Indiana basketball. And it wasn't the news that all of us wanted to hear, and it probably is not resonating very well in Cook Hall either, because it creates a even bigger summer and portal need for your Indiana Hoosiers than we all expected. So that's what's happened. And now I turn to the recruiting gurus, the research gurus, and I'm going to get out of the way and drink my gumball head and listen to the show. Let's just start off with that. When you heard the news, what are you thinking? What does it mean when someone like that decommits? We've been the benefit of that because of coaching changes. We've never been that just because a young man decided, well, Mbako was because of a player coming back. So there have been 3 recruits that Mike Woodson has brought in under the same circumstances. This is the first time that it's happened, I believe, to Mike Woodson. Bob, we'll start with you. What does the Liam McNeely decommit mean for Indiana basketball? And then later on we'll get into how you fix it.
Not to go all Lee Atwater, James Carville around here, and that's a Mike and I back in the 90s thing, but it's never a good look when, you really can't spin this any way. You announce that we're bringing the big guy back, and then 24 hours later somebody decommits. And it looks even a little more problematic when you think IU offered 31 in the class of 2024, got 11 official visits, and now have 0 incoming freshmen. That's a lot of resources going into this. And that's been kind of my thing in the last probably 2-3 weeks of where are we going? Right. Where are we going? And if it's to Nick's to do that, coach, I'm there. Call me. I'm there in an hour. And it's kind of what's the plan now? And I know Mike has really done a lot of digging into this in the last, I would say, 72, 96 hours as to what it's really going to take. And I think I just commented to somebody in the, Wine Country Mark, who asked a great question. It's like, well, do you believe in the Loch Ness Monster? It's hard. It's hard to see, can you build a national champion with 13 or 10 or 4 or 4 maybe. But when you're talking about this point, you're having to replace at least, you have 2 that are aging out, who's going to the draft, and you're not really sure what you're going to lose in the portal, because you got to think at least, whatever you think you're going to lose, just live there, because we'll be hearing about that over the next couple of weeks. But you're going to be seeing some kids that are exiting as well, potentially. But you have to rebuild you have guard depth that you need, and you're also losing out of that group 2 of your guys. I mean, you're losing a significant number of minutes out of those 3 players in XJ, Ware, and Walker. So you're going to have to kind of at this point re-terraform your lineup another time, and doing it using the portal versus recruiting, which now means you're going to be kind of piecing it together. The second part of this, and this is the other thing, is that the portal. I used this on our last podcast, but it's like the 1980 New York Yankees of the 80s, Steinbrenner trying to buy teams, and at one point trying Davy Collins, who was a 5'11" outfielder, on first base because he was trying to get speed into his lineup, and he's building this with free agency and trades and trying to build existing players into that. And I know Coach and I would both, could argue this point at, okay, so when you get a new team, even if they're older kids, it takes some time for them to gel. And it also takes even more time when they're brand new. I mean, I don't think either one of us, when you're coaching on the youth level, and you have every year, or if you have a new group, you put together a new travel team, for example. It takes a couple tournaments to get your feet wet, and that could be, or sometimes it may even take a quarter to a third of your season. And oftentimes some of those kids have even played together before, so you're bringing together 2 or 3 different groups and different units into one to play. At this point, you're talking about and that's when they're 10 through 15. What we're talking about, or at 17, what we're talking about now is we're talking about a team of they're playing college level basketball with college scouting reports, college systems, offensive and defensively. And you can, even if you get a great portal team, you're going to have to get them to gel. And Eric Musselman has a lot of paper on talent. Hasn't really gelled for him this year. I think you can argue Missouri. They brought a few transfers in, and their season is a lot different than it was a year ago. So there's a lot of almost like you put the dice in your hand and you're letting it ride, and you're hoping you don't get snake eyes, or you're hoping that you can kind of push, but it's tough to do. And I think that's probably the biggest issue right now, is that the question I think I really have going out of this is who you're trying to get And what are you going to do with them when you get them here? Because at this point, you may not be able to get the guys that you need to run what you need to run. So now the question is going to be, what do you run in its place? Or do you try it with different players and trying to terraform players on the move?
So I want to just follow up real quick on something that you said. I thought that was really important. Coach Woodson's even said that it's taken a long time for this team to gel. And you had Xavier Johnson and you had Leal and Galloway, players who had been here for 2 or 3 years. And then you brought in, he said half the team is new. And it seems like Indiana's going to be in that same spot. And so in this day and age, you can't wait until January or February to gel, because you're going to be in this situation again. You have to bring in the right people and have the right system, or select a system to get going as soon as you possibly can, knowing that it's going to be a struggle. But you got to find ways to win and compete early in the college, because there's only 31 games. There's not 82 in the NBA where then you sneak into playoffs as a 7 seed or 6 seed, get hot, and you have best of 5 and best of 7. This is one and done in the Big Ten tournament, one and done in the NCAA, and your games in November matter just as much as your games in March. And so right now there has not been a lot of proof that the 1 year that Indiana was good under Mike Woodson, you had a lot of veterans. You had a 5-year player that was a transfer. You had Xavier Johnson before he got hurt, and you intertwined with them 2 talented freshmen from Mount Verde with TJD, Race Thompson, Miller Kopp, and so that's a concern. I think that's a very good point. Mike, coming to you, you heard the news. What did you think about it, and what do you think it means for Indiana right now?
Real quick, I'm going to jump in real fast.
Yep.
And happy Thanksgiving. You're going to Atlantis in November.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So
must be a very empty plane. I'm going to
we're compressing.
Lots of seats available.
That process you just talked about, Coach. That process you just talked about just got compressed because of the high value targeting of those games, and the games you're going to need to be competitive in.
Yeah, and I think you can do it,
It
but
can be done.
it's a low percentage of success. And so the work's going to be really cut out for a coach and the program to do that. Mike, your thoughts when you heard the news, and what do you think it means for Indiana basketball?
Yeah, so I guess last night after I saw the Osterman bomb on Twitter that Woody was coming back, I figured I'd do what I usually do. I kind of jump on my computer and try to figure out, okay, how treacherous a road is this actually going to be in terms of getting from point A to point B, where, let's say, the program is at least reasonably on track and safe as it was, let's say, just like 12 months ago, or at least what we thought 12 months ago. So I started to reverse engineer a roster that could at least, at a minimum, get IU back to, let's say, last year's performance level, like a 4 seed. So I kind of took basically like Alabama's current team, which is, they're like projected to be a 4 seed right now.
Yep.
I did estimations based upon players that would be coming back, and I started slotting them based upon their productivity. I use a metric called box plus minus as a way to sort of connect players in terms of their relative performance. What I calculated to gauge what would IU need in the portal to actually hit a team like that, based upon just a reasonable assumption of some loss in the portal outward. What I came up with was, and this was before McNeely left, by the way, I basically found that I would probably have to have maybe the greatest portal haul in the short history of the portal. You would have to have something almost like a Dalton Connect, Joe Girard, Ray J. Dennis kind of haul in terms of hitting those numbers that you would probably need in terms of matching what you see on teams that are at that level. Now, obviously, some of it's dependent upon other players coming back. So if IU does have a pretty good retention rate, then obviously they won't need as much. But now they just lost one player in the last 90 minutes that I was calculating into the process. So now that's gone. So yeah, it's the hill's kind of high, unfortunately. I'm not saying it's not really impossible, because if you sort of dial down the expectations a bit, let's say, okay, well, what would it take to get at least maybe to a 8 seed, 9 seed? that would not take as much. And I think there are opportunities and windows that are available to IU in terms of the kind of players that may be available in the portal, especially at guard, because I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for IU to sell some shots and minutes going into next year. There are a few extra little complications that I did post on Peegs and other places about some things that maybe people aren't really like calculating right now. The NCAA changed their regs this last year, and they shortened the actual window for the portal from 60 days to 45 days. So it's going to be a little bit more of a tight window in terms of not necessarily like, forcing recruits to commit, but it's just going to be a lot more recruits jumping in the pool at the same time. And if you have to get, if you're one of the coaches has to get 5, 6, maybe even 7 players, then you're going to be in a much more compressed space in terms of like just logistics of setting up face-to-face meetings, phone calls, all that kind of stuff. It's just, it becomes a very difficult challenge just to contact all the people we need to just get the numbers in front of the coach to get things going.
Let me ask you guys this about that exact thing. I keep hearing this talk about they've already made connections and they already have things going this year that they haven't in the past. Is that part of college basketball now, where you're recruiting all year long, which by
I swear,
technicality,
Coach, it's magic. It's magic.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I've heard reports from reporters. I haven't heard anything or seen anything that they said that they seem to have a head start on the portal, other than just research and watching or connections. I know from some of my coaching connections in the league, there is people are constantly watching for players who might be leaving, and so. Does that give Indiana a head start and a boost to some of these players you need for those different levels? Or is it all going to be that tight window where everyone gets a shot at the same players? And then if that's the case, is Indiana struggling? If Liam says no, what's the momentum to bring that top level in other than cash, just straight cash, right, from NIL, Bob?
One thing I would start with that is, and this is where – what we're going to be watching in whether it's a week or 2 weeks or however long it is, when the season's finally done, when we can kind of put a cork on this and just kind of write it up. Who else is leaving, not just from a player standpoint, but also from your coaching staff? And if there are shakeups on the staff, which again is highly possible, you're looking at, okay, now with that you're leaving that coach's contacts go with them. And so the question becomes, were there relationships that Mike Woodson has or the guys that are remaining on the staff have that can continue this? Because your nightmare scenario, to tell you how it could go really bad, would be, okay, we're cleaning house. We're moving all 3 of the assistants. They got other gigs, and then all of a sudden now you're starting from scratch because now you're hiring assistants at the exact same time. You're in that 45-day window with everybody else with all these kids jumping into the pool at the same time. And that, to me, and you're also kind of having to also protect your own flank, because you need people that are kind of talking to your kids to make sure that they're not thinking, you know what, now's the time to go. So, you've got a lot of balls in the air that you're going to have to juggle, and you're going to need a CEO that does that. And okay, that's the job that's on the table. You're going to be spending a lot of time working those relationships inside your group, outside your group, and then just so who goes, who stays. I don't think we're going to see the nightmare scenario. I mean, the one thing I can say about IU staff is it's a pretty solid staff across the board. You don't get 11 official visits out of 31 offers with basically the firepower they were bringing in. If you've got a bunch of guys who don't know how to use a cell phone and don't know how to build a relationship with a kid. As for the evaluation standpoint, I kind of said it's magic from a standpoint of I'm sure people talk, I'm sure people text, I'm sure kids are back and forth. I'm sure parents reach out to coaches. I'm sure coaches reach out to parents. And And I mean, I think in the mid-major level, you're hearing more and more. You heard a lot of complaining and a lot of people saying last year, my kids' phones are lighting up. The problem that but the thing is, it's kind of like anything else, is that what happens outside of that purview. If it's not there, it depends if you want to see it or you don't. It's kind of like at one point in time, do you really want to see how the sausage is being made? Probably not. Just know that it's one of those things.
It's being made.
Yeah. It's one of those things where all the cool kids are doing it, and even the cool uncool kids are. So it's just something that it's just one of those things that goes with the job. And I would just say at this point that there's a lot of variables here that we just don't know at this point. But that's I think they feel like they're well positioned because you have a strong, and you can make the argument they have a strong NIL, a strong brand, and some playing time to dole out. Here we go.
Mike, where are you? And you can take that question too, but how many roster spots? And I'm probably going to stay away from names. I think the names we know of the players who have eligibility that might be more likely to leave, we're all smart enough to figure that out, but I'd rather just not mention the names and let them make that decision on their own. But there's likely one or two current players that have eligibility to leave, as well as the graduating players. Now Liam's off the board. You have some COVID year decisions that need to be made. What is your best estimate as to how many roster spots are going to be needed to fill? And then, Bob, you could add to that right after, is like, what are we needing, and how likely it is that we get the full complement of what we need. So kind of a two-pronged question to you guys, and you can just take it back and forth. How many roster spots, and what specific is the priority that you think Coach Woodson needs to hit in order to make up for this loss?
Yeah, I would say I always, whenever I look at this stuff, I never like pick one number. I usually pick like a midpoint and then do a range. And so a lot of the analytical work I'm doing right now in terms of trying to gauge all this stuff out, I'm looking at probably like 5 or 6 portal players. It could be less if you have like higher, a little bit better retention. Could be more. We just don't know. I mean, one of the things that I've always observed about like these cases where a coach is in a little bit of trouble is there's just a lot of volatility, and there's just not a lot of ability to like sit in one point in the calendar and say, oh, what's going to happen 2 weeks from now, is because everything is going like this, and things can really move very quickly. That makes your projections like a week or two ago look pretty silly. So right now, I'm just sort of like picking a midpoint saying, okay, about 5 or 6, let's say, and I can sort of like, work off of that. In terms of the type of players, I would say from just a scouting standpoint, you need driver attackers, you need shooters, you need guys with athleticism. I always, like what I was saying in the intro about, March, when we watch all these teams that are going deep in the tournament, and there's always that subtle comparison that takes place. It's like, man, look at those teams. Like, my God, look at that 1 seed and 2 seed. They have like 4 or 5 guys that just, they're long, they're athletic, they can hit threes, they can attack the rim. That's the kind of players you need. You need to be able to look at the teams that are at like the seed line of where you want to be. Watch those teams and watch the kind of players they have and say, okay, if I really want to be there, then I probably have to start looking a lot more like them than I look the way I am right now. So I would say, again, dynamic, long, athletic guys that can attack the rim, put pressure on defenses, and hit shots.
Bob?
So I'll stick with Mike's idea on 5 or 6. And I mean, you're going to definitely need a point and a post. You're going to need a lead guard and a post player out of that. Just even if you keep Sparks, even if or Sparks decides to be kept, or same thing with Renew, and we'll just go and slot those guys into those kind of slots there. But you're probably going to need a third, at least someone down there that can kind of that can kind of do maybe even double duty sometimes if you want to go larger with Malik. And then there's also the thing that and Coach Woodson said it, that he's converting the process of Malik at the 4. I'm not big on numbered positions, but he's thinking of more of a wing player versus a purely post guy, more of a 3-level scorer. And you're seeing some a great deal of improvement, I would say, in kind of his ball handling and his ability to get to the rim in different ways. But you're going to need some help there. But it's not going to need to be kind of a thing where you have multiple post players. You're going to need those drivers, attackers. Lead guards, you're going to need some dynamic players that allow Trey Galloway to not be the primary guy that's initiating your actions. You're going to need guys that can. I would say that you don't need 40% shooters from three. You need 35% shooters from three who can finish at the rim. 35% shooters from three that can defend at a high level. I think a lot of this would be, if you're looking where to kind of look for players at this point, you're going to be looking, I think, a lot of mid-majors who have had some pretty good success against high major competition. Think of freshmen who are going to be sophomores, and sophomores especially who are going to be juniors, and especially if your intention is to try to build a winner now, and Mike's hit this point on multiple occasions, you need juniors. So if you find a guy who's a sophomore shooting to be a junior, who does 4 or 5 of the skills that you need, sees the floor well, can get the ball to the open spot, reads defenses incredibly well, has a good first step, and they've had a large jump their freshman to sophomore year in at a mid major like a Toledo, or give me another one out of the OVC or something similar. You see that type of jump, and it's like, okay, we can get this guy. Or if you have kids at Indiana State, for example, who are looking to make a move after this year, this would be, IU can maybe has some advantages built in that might help out a little bit there. But I would say if I'm looking at it, if I'm doing it for Woodson, I'm going to be looking at a variety of ages right now. I'm not just going to get a bunch of juniors and seniors necessarily, because I don't think at this point, I think he needs to get a little more balance on this so he's not stuck here again in a year. And so at this that's a huge point for me.
That leads to our question here. Again, I throw a couple questions at you. I'm sorry for that at the same time. But is it a 1 year? Does he have to hit a 1 year? What happens if he brings in some young guys and isn't successful, but it would build for the future? Like, how do you achieve a relevant roster next year to reach that 8 seed or better, which I think he's probably going to need? I don't know if just getting to the tournament is enough to save Coach after all of this. Obviously, missing the tournament is going to be a huge hot seat. But if you get a 9 or 10 seed, or you're in the play-in game, is that enough? And then, so that's one question: is how do you get a relevant roster next year, and yet try to build some momentum of a program that is then doesn't have to do this year after year, but has some ability to repeat winning? And you guys have done all that research about teams and all of that stuff. How does that fit into this? And what kind of situation is Indiana in now that Liam's gone? And there's even more. I don't know if I'm asking a very coherent question. Probably the whiskey and the beer is starting to get to me. But it feels a lot better. It feels a lot better than when the show started.
That's okay. Feeling a little warmer.
It is. I can see it in my face. Okay. But the seriousness is the pressure to win now versus building a program which took a 1 year sabbatical this year. And depending on who stays and who goes, it's a start over in some ways. Do you do that every year? Can you be successful with the new roster every year? Or how do you get good next year and still build for the future, I guess is the best way for me to try to say that.
Okay.
Cheers.
Yeah, I guess I can answer those in parts. What I try to emphasize to fans, and like when a new coach is brought in, when we talk about like chip stacks and all the other research that we discuss, like on X's and Joe's, it's really important for coaches to try to survive, to take advantage of the honeymoon that is given to them, because one of the biggest distinctions in terms of the predictability of a coach getting fired is how well do they build up their roster during the honeymoon. And the honeymoon is typically like, that 2.5, let's say, year period of time where recruits don't hold coaches accountable for like what's going on in the program. They've sort of like given them the benefit of the doubt, and coaches are basically able to recruit players that they otherwise would not be able to outside of the honeymoon. That's why I always compare the honeymoon is like, hitting baseballs in batting practice, and outside the honeymoon, it's like, taking actual pitches from like, a Cy Young winner. If you don't really hit the honeymoon appropriately in terms of building up the roster, getting enough like long-term recruits, especially high school recruits that will stay with you a while, or at least portals that are maybe 2 or 3 year portal kids. You find yourself in this situation that we're in right now, is that there's always this balance in terms of like rosters. The more high school kids you're able to get that are stable, it pushes down the demand that you'll have for the portal. Now, of course, if it goes the other way, if you don't get enough high school kids and you don't have stability in terms of the roster with kids that stay longer than 1 year, then the demand of the portal is going to go up, because there always has to be some kind of equilibrium that's established. Right now, IU is just completely like off balance. They have not had a proper hit rate in terms of landing the appropriate number and quality of high school kids that they need. They've gotten good players. They just haven't got enough of them, and that's the problem. And so it's just a numbers game. So what you do now is you have to try to do 2 things at once. You have to get kids that can hit a pretty decent level of productivity. Like I said, a few minutes ago when talking about like the Alabama comparison, you need to get kids that can be like 7, 8, 9 box plus minus type of players. That is like players that, are kind of in the Malik Renew, Khalil Ware level of output. Guys that can actually like, not necessarily like all American or all conference, but like really, really good players. You need those now, and you need them in numbers, and you need them like spread across different parts of the roster. And to be able to do that, you might have to start taking some portals that are, let's say, sophomores and juniors. I would, if I were advising the team, that's why I would go heavy on trying to find the best available, accessible sophomore and junior portal guys that you can find. If you just go out there if you find a bunch of seniors, if you just load up on a bunch of seniors, you're going to be right back where you started, like where we are.
So your hope is you bring them in, you win enough to get a 7-8 seed, and then you have them back for another year, and their experience helps you continue that growth.
Yeah, it's not just the experience. I mean, that's obviously a big part of it. It just reduces all the time and energy you have to go through to keep doing this over and over again. I mean, remember, coaches have only so much time and availability to look for players. It is much easier to only have to fill 3 spots than 6 or 7. And
we had 6 this year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the coaches that are really stable, like Matt. Let's say, like, I hate to say it, but Matt Painter.
Right.
Painter has his roster stable at this point, so much so that he can start recruiting in 2025 and 2026 the way Indiana can't. Because Indiana is just so like living hand to mouth right now in terms of trying to get productivity into the roster. Because again, what we talked about, they just haven't been able to establish any sort of stability. Whereas this more stable programs, they can start looking more in the future. They can plan out ahead better than programs that are doing what IU is.
It basically delays you a year further because of what Mike just described. Remember, the class of 2024 was supposed to be that signature class, similar to what the 2022s were. At the time, I think you notice it, but you're not all that, how should you put it, concerned until it becomes right there in front of you, but you kind of keep it on your radar screen as a possibility. It took them from, I believe it was between the McNeely commitment and the Cup's commitment, and I guess I can say this now comfortably. We've not had a long-term commitment since Gabe Cup's, or so coming out of high school. We've done really well in the short terms. We've done really well with some portal hits, but this, after, think of all the offers, all the visits. And so now we're delayed a year again with the class of 2024. And now we got to go into 2025 and see if we can get a 3 to 5 person, probably, would you say, I would say top 5 class, Mike. Would you say that that would be about what you need at this point?
Yeah, to really fill the holes that are going to be there that we know of at this point. Yeah, that would be that would be important.
So
Can Indiana improve? Can Indiana improve if, let's say, they get some portal kids in, but make a 12 seed play-in game or just miss the tournament, but have some kids that are sophomores and juniors? Can Coach Woodson continue to build and win, having 2 years? Like, if you're just building for the future,
right?
Like, does he have 2 years, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm probably, and this is just because I do this kind of work, so I'm always like looking at the historical data of like, okay, this program is in this point, and here's all the variables that are going on, and here's how many times this coach made it or didn't. I don't think. I think Woodson still has opportunity to get out, and I would certainly not say that all hope is lost. It's not. I mean, there's always the opportunity to get out of this, and I think if he can hit on, especially I'm thinking of there are very specific players that if he could actually hit, I think he possibly could, then there's definitely a window of opportunity to get out of this. But this is a hole, because most of the coaches that start hitting these sort of like tripwires that I've seen in the history of this kind of stuff don't make it, just from a probability standpoint. And that's, I wish I could say that, the data said otherwise, but unfortunately it doesn't. So it's you kind of have to put your rally cap on a little bit and say, okay, there's some real work that needs to be done for this to be an escape. There is opportunity there, but it is going to have to take some things that, like, let's say that some hitting on players that you have not been able to do in the past at a rate that you have not been able to do in the past needs to start happening, like right now.
And it's also worth noting that you're in a profession and you're in a college basketball world where 2/3 of the field is in their first contract. That 0 to 5. So you have a bunch of other guys who are just hopping on the honeymoon. So every program that's making a coaching change right now, they bought themselves a new honeymoon. And it will not necessarily impact the 2025s, but you have some other guys like, okay, great example is Micah Shrewsbury. He's 1 year in at Notre Dame. He's, you look at the offer list on some of IU players and you see Notre Dame right up there too. He's going into year 2. He's in his honeymoon at this point, and even though their record, they're worse than IU with Ken Pom. Their record's worse across the board. He doesn't have the same history of tape, as we would say, that IU has at this point, going in 3 full seasons of Mike Woodson. So players can basically, when Micah Shrewsbury says we're going to be different in the following ways, I'm going to point to what we did. I'm going to point to what we did when I was with Butler, with the Celtics at Purdue. These are programs that, okay, yeah, we know what those are. Here's what we did here. Here's what we did at Penn State for a couple of years with shooting the 3-ball especially, and kind of playing this type of offense. Now, that's what you're up against. You're up against a whole lot of coaches who now have that honeymoon period in their purview, and as an advantage to them. And you don't. Now, Mike's right. You can land those guys, because a lot of this also comes down to, at the end of the season, Mike Woodson can point to his team and say, look, we brought a team together, we had injuries, let's see if this conversation can actually work. If we had Xavier Johnson, this would be a much different conversation across the board. We may, we'd be looking potentially at a tournament team. And you see what, you are a dynamic point guard, son. You can come into our program and you can do that for us, much like Xavier did it for us for that first year that he was here, and Jalen Hurts-Cofino did it the second year. And you see what happens just when we don't have you, and you're the kid, and you can maybe make that sales point. I just want to kind of also say, it's and we're going to probably talk about this in episode 7 a little bit, when we do it. But I want to just kind of preview my thoughts on this whole thing with Woodson, where it's been rough for him. It was a rough situation coming in, because I don't necessarily look at this as Mike Woodson year 3. I look at this as RG year 7 from a recruiting standpoint. As crazy as it sounds, that this group, his year 7, was going to have to be, his job initially was to take mostly Archie players and a few portal ads and get that team back to the tournament, which he did. And then he did it in year 2 with a few more ads. And you started seeing some momentum. You kind of started seeing how this thing could play out. Didn't really, I won't call it taking a break in the 2023s, but he preferred the 2024. So they went heavy on the 2024 to get him for next season. And kind of built this sort of almost circuit break in for this third year. But it's really hard to do both at the same time. Win now on one and build for later on the second, as we're talking about. And Woodson's tried to do it. And you can say, well, he didn't make it. Yeah. I would say he got close. But then there's also the other thing, is close only counts on horseshoes, hand grenades, and nuclear weapons. This is a results-driven world at a time when, Indiana fans have, you played the A.J. Moye thing. That's the last time we felt, maybe Crean in 2013. That sometimes during the Crean era, but the last time we were sitting in a Final Four was 2002. And I'll just add and again, that's just where we are at this point. And so it's, the pivot's there. The question becomes then, how does it all kind of shake out and play out?
And we're trying to handle this as respectfully as possible. I'm going to take a little turn, though. I have not seen much evidence that this percentage of the hit that we need, that we haven't demonstrated in the past under Mike Woodson's leadership. And then you have a guy, like what you said, Bob, the pitch is going to be this, but Liam McNeely just said no to the pitch. I mean, he saw the injuries. He knew what was going on. He sees 3 years of tape. He committed. Mm-hmm. And he was buying in, and then he has said no. So now you're a portal guy, and you're at the OVC or you're at something else. Like, you have to I don't know, again, historically, how you change that narrative. And now you're going to have to maybe get some guys who just want the portal or the NIL money to come in. Now you got all kinds of 6 or 7 different personalities that are, maybe not the guys you want, but the guys you can get to fill a roster. And is that good enough? It just seems like it's that hole, Mike, that you talked about is pretty damn big. And I don't want to sell don't root for Indiana anymore, or we're destined. No. It could happen. But it just seems really, really big cycle right now that is just repeating itself in some of these losses to Boogie Flan, to high school recruits. And you worry about Sicily going to Purdue and some of these types of things. Can that dam be shut off and the damage stopped with this staff, I guess? And I know we don't know that answer, but it's just frustrating to sit here and hear you guys talk about all this and knowing what I'm gathering is it's kind of a long shot that this thing's going to work out.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the way to think about it is, a lot of the metaphors that Bob and I use on X's and Joe's when it comes to when we talk about this stuff about recruiting and program building, a lot of it is around poker and cards. And so, if you watch the World Series of Poker, you always see, as cards are flipped, you'll see the percentage likelihood of, one player or the other winning. Coaching tenures are a little bit like that. It's you just see as time goes by, you just see, you almost in my own head, when I see certain things happen, I can almost say, oh yeah, that coach just took a big hit, and yeah, he's probably down 10% right now. Or something good happens, oh man, he bumped up. He's got a good 70% chance now of being, going to his extension. I think that's probably the way you need to start thinking about it, is that, all of this stuff is just governed by probabilities. Nothing is ever guaranteed either way. There's no guarantee that it's going to perfectly work out, or that it's guaranteed that there's no hope at all. But you have to be realistic about what the probabilities are. And when they are long, they are long. I would say, one thing I was thinking about today is that a lot of the best portal kids, I was just looking at the stat, the top 20 kids in the portal, 85% of them went to schools that made the NCAA tournament the prior year. And if you go down the list further, away from the top of the top rated kids in the portal, that percentage changes as you start getting more kids that are willing to go to teams that did not make the tournament. But of course, then now you're getting into a trade-off. It's okay, there are kids that are more accessible, but they're just lower performers. There are some kids that are high performers that will maybe give you a chance, but do you have some kind of angle on that kid? Is he a local kid? Does your Assistants have some kind of AU connection to them. So you kind of have to really thread some very thin needles all at the same time. Like I posted on social media earlier today, is that sometimes it's like you have to hit like a 5-leg parlay on a bet to make this stuff work. And any one part of the parlay, any one part of that bet that falls through, then it all just, you lose. So you have to hit several things. Several of these have to pass through 5 windows at once for it all to work. It can happen, and it's possible, but again, you just have to really hope that these things all kind of go in sequence.
Bob, I'm going to come to you in just a second.
Yeah, please.
I do think I think portal bigs will want to come because of what Khalil Ware and TJD and Renew have done. But the thing Indiana needs more are those driving guards that we talked about, those shooters that we talked about, a dynamic point guard. And those are the ones who have been saying no to Mike Woodson, and just recently with Liam and Boogie Fland and then some of the top portal guys. And then also, I don't know where this fits into your answers or anything, but sometimes you get a guy like Timberlake, who everyone thought was really good, and he goes to Kansas, and he's not playing for Kansas. And you get 2 guys in the Big Ten like Domask at Illinois and Jones at Purdue that Southern Illinois, they scored, but you really didn't. They weren't on Indiana's radar as the top level, and they've come in to a little more established programs and really shined. Yeah, so there's a couple different types of transfer portals that Timberlake was really sought after, and he hasn't played up to the expectations there. So you could get guys in that you really like that are in the top 5 and get a top recruiting class and they don't play, or you can get a guy like Ware who is at top and he does perform that way. So that's the gamble too that I think goes into that 5-leg parlay or the poker odds too. Bob, I interrupted you, or
no? You're fine, because that's actually a really good point, because I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Where it's like you just don't know. You just don't know. Okay, you got pocket aces. It looks really, really, really good, and then they flop 2 7s and a 2, and the idiot that stayed in and raised you because he doesn't know what he's doing just beats your hand, and you're just sitting there drawing dead, and you're thinking to yourself, how does this happen? And the guy goes, pot odds. Well, no, it's just sometimes it's just that sort of thing happens. So. You look at a Timberlake, and Timberlake was not pocket aces, but he was definitely better than kind of what his productivity turned into. I would say, and this is a cautionary thing where Mike and I wouldn't say we disagree necessarily. We just haven't really talked about it that much, where we've beaten ourselves over the heads for 6 hours over the topic. But there is something to be said for player development. There's something to be said for sometimes a player just pops out. And not sometimes, but a lot of times it's just a situation where they change situation, scenery changes. They were missed in high school. Like, is there another Braden Smith out there that's been sitting at a place that just hopped in the portal to say, you know what, I'm really not happy at Southern Nebraska teachers and Barbers College. That's the guys that recruited me. They gave me $50 of NIL money and a free haircut, and now they just say let's just see if somebody else. And then someone sees them on some film. A guy knows a guy who knows a guy and contacts you, and you have a similar type of player that wasn't as highly recruited or highly sought after. Yeah. Now the question there is, and again, Mike's right. It's the 5-leg parlay. It's kind of a long shot bet. You don't have much success in kind of saying, okay, can you build a team of these guys? Can you turn Major League into a college basketball story and make it a documentary? And if you can do that,
that's a great. The king of the analogy has just shown up, everybody.
Exactly. Wow. Well, I mean, brother, you put a lot of pressure on me when you called me that when you put me in the same as Galen. I was like, oh man, he's got all this media experience. I'm just some hack student politician who coaches some basketball. When you really think about it. But no, in all seriousness, it is a thing where you might be able to just say, okay, can we take this? Can we moneyball our way into it? Would be the other thing. Can we find the Island of Misfit Toys and turn it into a regular season winner that can get a 4 seed in the tournament or a 6 seed? Yeah, I mean, but it's going to take a heck of a lot of work. It's going to take, and the question is, the clock's ticking, and you got to trust it. There are guys on this staff who are really, really, really smart, and they've got a lot of film, and they dig into synergy, and they kind of have a good idea of what's going on. Not kind of. They have a very good idea of what's going on. And guarantee you, they're working the phones. I mean, one other thing we talked about, I didn't bring this up also. For the first time in history, in the history of the sport of college sports, Players now have agents, legal agents. It's not just Uncle Billy sending out a text anymore. You've got guys who are professionalized in the field, and they have contacts. So there's a way of contacting kids without necessarily tampering. The agent may put it out there in a certain way, and then messages get back and forth. So I think there's probably a good little conversational point that's happening across the board where I think a lot of coaches across the country have a really good idea of who's really thinking about it and are ready to go. You got to pounce, and it's sharks ready to pounce when the blood hits the water. And this is a dog-eat-dog profession. You're looking at these guys have hit the top of it. So they're going to be, if they're willing to compete on every night when they're playing, you bet they're competing in those 9 months when they're having to recruit. So I'll go there. It's just it's a lot to kind of comprehend at this point, but we want to paint an accurate picture is the first thing. Of this is the hump.
You went there.
It's
a little bigger than a hump.
I fought it for 75 minutes, boys. There's a moment where you just got to throw it out there, but you got to get them over the hump, but the point is, whether it's a hump or it's the Himalayas, it is what it is, and this is where we are. And the question is, rooting for this to be successful is a good thing, because whether it's regardless what happens at the top of the program, whether there's a year 5 and a year 6, or someone they make a decision or he makes a decision or whatever, you don't necessarily want this thing to go into a complete ash heap, because then you're looking at another 3-year rebuild process, and we're talking a painful 3-year rebuild process where the first 2 aren't all that solid, and then by year 3 you start seeing a little bit of hope, and by year 4 you're hoping you want to be back at it, and that's you want to at least have something in the tank to be able to kind of pull that through, because you want to be able to have a recruiting profile where you're actually shooting above it and you're hitting the sweet spot like we've been talking about for a while now.
Mike, any last thoughts about Liam McNeely's decommit and what it means to Indiana basketball, and where and how Indiana has to kind of recover now and going forward before we move into some questions?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's important when you lose your one and only recruit from your 3rd recruiting cycle. A lot of the work I do, I always note like how important those like 2nd and 3rd cycle is historically for programs. Like the programs that like Jay Wright at Villanova, Billy Donovan at Florida, Tom Izzo, go down the list. I mean, one of the most consistent patterns you see is like the coaches that did really well in that window around like the 2nd and 3rd recruiting cycle. Those guys that did well typically like stayed a long time. The coaches that didn't do well, they typically went the other direction. So yeah, it hurts in the sense that obviously now it depletes your roster, and now it just adds one more task onto an already very, very long task list in terms of your recruiting. And again, it's time and logistics. It's very difficult to do that all while, again, like what you said, Coach, is like trying to build for now and for later at the same time. And so, yeah, it's one of those unfortunate things that sometimes happens when you have these kind of declines that happen within a program like this, that you start to see sort of these symptoms start popping up, like recruits start leaving, and then the media starts like kicking up, and then fans start getting upset. It's just, I actually have this like chart. There's this cycle of like, as things start going down, things start like piling back on top of each other. So there's just the weight of things kind of going this direction tends to carry and go pretty quickly. So as a staff, you just have to figure out how can you stop it. Best way to stop it is like wins and getting guys to come in.
Does your research have, when podcast hosts pile on, added to your the chip stack?
I'm going to add that. This is a good lab study right here. For my work, so I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, and the thing that it's been a whirlwind here. I had a live podcast before this with our high school students in bracketology, so the news broke. And then 20 minutes later, I was on the air for 45 minutes with them. Didn't have a lot of time to process this or really think about this decommit. But it just hit me now as, too, one of the things Indiana had was that Mount Verde connection. And you know, now do you keep that? That's been the pipeline of decent recruits.
Yeah.
And now you lose McQueen or Derek Queen, and then you lose now McNeely. What are those guys saying at Mount Verde? Is that pipeline going to still be there? Is that connection still going to be there? That just popped into my mind too. That's another negative, possibly, because you all have your regions. You know, someone recruits Atlanta and that AAU program and everything. But bad news travels. It's kind of like the stock market. You know, good news and bad news greatly affects things, and you just have to go a different direction, or you got to try to meld that. But that was a heck of a connection that a lot of us were proud of Coach Woodson for. And now all of a sudden, there are two Mount Verde guys that have said no. Can you re-engage in that? That just popped up for me. Bob, any last thoughts again on the disappointing news of Liam McNeely?
I appreciate you bringing that up, because it actually dawned on me about an hour and a half ago going, oh, geez, yeah, that was kind of something we were hanging our hat on, was we got into that market after so long.
Right.
And I'll just, not to be the bringer of more gloom and doom, but think about if you're one of those top 30 to 80s that IU's talking to, has an offer on the table, gets visits, but you feel as if maybe IU's got 2 or 3 other guys they've been talking to that are more, you know, that, and you're hearing from other coaches, well, you know, IU, they only really want to play and recruit their 5-stars. You know, they only, and we've been here since day one. And then you show up at the table with your hat in hand going, hi, we're back. It's like, there's going to be, so you're going to have to massage that too. And I will just say this much about Mike Woodson, that, you know, one thing we've known, and, you know, depending on how he attacks this next 13 months is going to be very essential. We're going to know a lot by Thanksgiving, like we said this year. We felt a little better going into Thanksgiving and Christmas than we did the year before. That's gone now. But I would say he's going to have to kind of look at this. You know, it's going to be a thing where if he gets out in front of kids and starts talking to families, and he uses his personality the way that we know he can do it, that's a heck of a thing. He has a presence, and he has something that, you know, kids, we're seeing kids playing for him now, even though things weren't particularly great. So there's a way, you know, there is something there in that in how he approaches things. So we've heard kids walk back going, Woody's great, and if he just keeps building those relationships over the period of time, you can see something. You know, maybe that gives him more of a fighting shot.
All right. I hope that we have fed your appetite. The thousands of people who are tuning into the show. I hope you heard some information that'll help you clear up. We really don't know the reasons why. There's some speculation, obviously, and depending on how you feel about Mike Woodson, you're going to say one thing, this is the reason why, or whatever. But the bottom line is Liam McNeely is no longer going to be an Indiana Hoosier, and that has put a step back, or Indiana a step back in the recruiting, and made the job even harder going forward for Mike Woodson. I think that is some truthful stuff. Mike and Bob have done an excellent job of talking about and explaining to me the 5-leg parlay that we're going to try to win next year, and a lot of times those cash. So that's the bright shining moment. But coming up on Assembly Call Radio, it's mailbag time. We got a lot of great questions from our community members, and we'll answer them next. So stick with us here on Assembly Call. All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. Outstanding numbers up there on the show. Again, a disappointing night. For some of us, it might have been a disappointing 2 nights in a row, despite the win. For others, Wednesday night's news was a happy time for you. Bottom line is, Indiana fans, we got to try to not take it out on each other based on what opinions we have. Appreciate that we do like Indiana, and keep moving forward, keep listening to X's and Joe's, and keep taking shots and drinking beer. It kind of helps. I was kind of concerned about this podcast, but I'm having a hell of a time. So great company and booze. right?
Always.
Great company
Can't
and
beat it.
booze. It just you can't beat it. So let's go. Let's get right into these questions. We could probably answer it somewhat quick. We've been going for an hour and 20, and a lot of them I think we've talked about. So I'll ask them, and then if we've talked about them, I'll just move on to the next one. So here we go.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open three, and I never miss an episode of The Assembly Call.
Welcome back to the Assembly Call. It's now time for our mailbag. Most of these questions were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community on Substack, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com. I'm Brian Tonsoni. I'm here with Mike Wiemuth and Bob Moats talking about Indiana basketball, a 3-game winning streak, a renewed coach back for a year, and a top recruit who says sayonara to the Indiana Hoosiers. It's been our topic of discussion this evening. And now we're talking about some questions. Jared asked, best educated guess on how many scholarships we'll have to fill. We've answered that. 5 or 6 is probably the median number there. How do we convince some of our main players to stay and not enter the portal? We've thought that's Mike Woodson's best trait. You just said it, Bob, that his ability to communicate and reach kids. He was able to keep TJD and Race Thompson and some of those. He's going to have to do that again. Your thoughts on how to recruit your own players. What's Mike Woodson's pitch? Bob, we'll start with you, and then Mike, just take it afterwards. How does he keep some players? What's his pitch?
I think first off, it's kind of showing where kids were and where they are, and that's not going to work for everybody. But I think it's that first thing of and also it's looking at the guys, as if you get a key piece or two to fall, and others may be like, okay, I can be with okay, they're coming back. I can see where I fit in all this. I also think it's also, showing further development, of what he can what the staff can do for them. Guys like Calbert Cheney, guys like Jordan Holes, guys, again, our 3 assistant coaches, I think also can kind of pull in there. The guys like Adam Howard can pull in there as well, where they can kind of sit down with these guys and be kind of like, okay, this is what we see. This is where we see you going. Cliff Marshall is another great example, where it's like from Malik Renew, it's like, look at the body, and you're learning how to play in it. So here's where we see you going in year 3. I think that there's a lot of that, and I also just think kind of the relational edge, and there. I mean, I could also see with a couple of them, it's like, look, was it your best year? No. Do you know you can do better? Yeah. Can you do it? And so can we do it together? Because this may be just a thing of like, you can do, with these guys, we have a chip on our shoulder. Let's go forward. The question is, can they band together? They have been banding together on the court. Can we see this team band together after the season's over just as effectively as we saw them, band together in a couple of these games, these last 3 games?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And yeah, I think, the portal, I mean, going back to my old HR days, I mean, the portal really creates almost an open, employment market, basically. Mm-hmm. So, people can look outside to other programs and say, could I get a better deal over there? And the deal, not necessarily money, just the whole experience. Will the offense fit me a little bit better at school X versus the one I'm at now? So I think if you're Mike Woodson and the staff, you have to start thinking about yourself like you're a manager or a CEO at a company trying to retain key employees. It's like, look, here's what the experience is going to be like going forward. That's going to be different than what it was this last year. And it might have to be some kind of presentation around scheme. It's like, look, I know we kind of did this and it was maybe not the best fit for you. Here's what we're going to do differently next year that's actually going to be a more appropriate fit. So you're not going to be frustrated. I could see guys like Galloway and Renew could really benefit from something like that, saying, look, we could develop if we could get some guys in here that could maybe spread things out a little bit, relieve you of certain duties, then push you into a more appropriate role to where you actually belong, and unclog the lane to allow you more space to go one-on-one against, big guys. That kind of presentation, I think, would be essential in order to make sure that you're retaining the most key guys that you're going to need to have going for some stability next year. So I think there really is about like a competitive presentation of what Indiana's going to look like going into 2025 that's different than this year, and how are you going to be a better option than a lot of the other schools that are out on the market.
Mike, you hit a huge point, is change. And I think something us coaches are very stubborn. We have our systems, we have our beliefs, we believe they're going to work. But also good coaches adapt in ways that they need to. And I think that's the big thing. When we broke down the state of the program, it was A, Woodson deserves to come back no matter what, B, come back with a lot of changes, or C, Ryan and I were pretty hard C's, but we could understand B. And then when he was named on Wednesday, we said, okay, B has to happen. There has to be changes in recruiting. There has to be changes in style. There has to be changes in the approach of sub patterns, all those things, so many things he's got to be willing to change. And I think if Mike Woodson loves Indiana basketball and wants Indiana basketball, then he needs to change the things he can and yet still stay true to his values. I would never ask a coach to give up their true values of what they believe in, but there's also some things that are different as the game evolves, and I have not seen that. That was where my doubts were with Coach Woodson all along. I have not seen evidence that the very thing you're saying to recruit our players to stay at a high level, or to recruit some people that we need at the wings and the driving and the guard to come to Indiana, I have not seen evidence of it. That doesn't mean that everyone can't change for the better when it kind of hits us in the face, and maybe all of this stuff and Liam's decommitment is a huge wake-up call to the staff and to Coach Woodson that you have to adapt in a college way. Maybe we've seen that, and maybe it's evident in the last 3 games and some of the way they've played a lot better in the last 3 games, that maybe it has hit home that there are some ways that things need to be changed. Very good. Kathy says NIT chances after the current wins. I think it a lot better. The NCAA is a no-go. Jeanette, any rumors that Anthony and Trey returning for one more year? They have COVID years. Is that correct?
Correct.
If they wanted to come back. I don't know one way or the other. I don't know percentages of that. I think the shorter portal window question was answered, Jeanette. And how many players do you estimate won't be back? Also answered. Jack said, just curious about your excellent post, Mike, in AC today about what we need to do upcoming year. No mention of Mbako. Do we know that he's gone? More than likely, especially with his late play. I think he might give something professional a run. Maybe if he at least will go and test the waters. Bob, your thoughts on Mbako?
Yeah. He can. I mean, I can see him definitely declaring. I'm not sure what the agent hiring process is now in the rules. I mean, I haven't boned up on those recently. I have a job, but the point is, there is the other thing where it's like, the question is, does he go ahead and do the whole go test the waters to the NBA, then also portal, and then start entertaining offers, or does he just test the waters and then go that route? It's going to be interesting to kind of see that. And even if he portals, doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't come back to his home institution. That's the other thing, is that when you're looking, and especially when you're looking at the era of NIL, and look at the era of kids moving. So Mbako it's kind of like, it'll be interesting to kind of see how he develops. But I think Coach is right. His play has kind of shown that maybe he wants to be taken a little more closely by scouts and pros on pro day, in that pro world.
Yeah.
Did you go ahead, Mike? Did you want to say something?
No, I agree with what
Mbako?
Bob said. No, yeah, I think what he said is right. I mean, he's the NBA and even like European teams. Everyone's looking for shooting, especially from guys that are like over 6'6". So I could definitely see him testing the waters, at least getting some feedback, and what he does after that, who knows? But yeah, I agree with you, Coach, that the better he shoots, let's say in the Big Ten tournament, if he has like another one of those 3 for 5, 4 for 6 kind of games coming up, or even 2 of them, then yeah, I could definitely see maybe his numbers changing a little bit and some opportunities opening up.
It shows 3-level scoring. His driving has gotten a lot better.
Yeah, exactly.
He is also rebounding the ball extremely well too. Mm-hmm. So all of those things I think are there.
I would think Renew and Mbako are 2 huge pieces to fill that hole, to try to get to stay. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I've heard nothing but Renew coming back with NIL money and all of that stuff. You never know. In this day, everyone's a free agent, right? But if for some reason Mbako is convinced to come back for a year, I think that does give a couple pieces that if they were gone, then that 5-leg parlay might become a 6-leg parlay or a 7-leg parlay, because those are talented young men that would really help kind of, with Bob's hump there, getting over that a little bit. Mike asks, did I hear there's a chance Trey Galloway can break an assist record for the year? I believe so. He is one of 4 Hoosiers with 3 games of 11-plus assists in a career, joining Isaiah Thomas, Jamal Meeks, and Michael Lewis. He needs 2 assists on Sunday to set IU's single-season Big Ten assist record, currently held by Quinn Buckner at 106. And again, I think going back just to the Minnesota and Maryland games and those games, his assist numbers are why Indiana's playing better basketball. I think he's playing to score and to get other people. I see joy in Trey Galloway again, which I didn't see for a long amount of time. And something has helped him just relax and play outstanding basketball. So, Mike, yes, an assist record is there. We've talked to Paul. I want to address, at least you asked a question. What are your guesses about the makeup of the roster next year? We've already done that. And then I think our last question tonight will be Bill, and we'll kind of – I might tweak this a little bit, Bill. He said, with so many unknowns, how do we navigate our rational conclusions about next season, particularly until the portal opens? Do we have any idea who will serve as a realistic chance of adding at the 5 spot or point guard? We don't know any of that. But I do want to frame this for us as a last call for our show this evening. We'll start with you, Bob, and then go to you, Mike, and then I'll wrap it up. Is what are reasonable floor expectations of acceptability, and what is the best case scenario that Mike Woodson really needs to hit, in your opinion, next year with results of the portal and recruiting? What is the bare minimum that he needs to hit to be acceptable and get Indiana headed in the right direction? And then what's really the top level expectation? Bob, starting with you.
I think it's first off I'm going to do the qualitative. I'll leave Mike with the quantitative. Was that okay with you, man?
Go ahead. Yeah.
You can go any way you want.
I know. Well,
I've had a couple shots and a beer.
We're all feeling good, and I just wanted to kind of prep Mike a little bit, kind of where I'm going there, because I'm also buying myself a little bit of time on the qualitative, because I think some style of play differentials will be critical. If we can, if we start seeing some defense, and I'm going to start with the defensive level. If we start seeing, okay, so let's say Mike Woodson doesn't get another rim protector like he's had the last 3 seasons. Does he, will he evolve a little bit in how he designs his help schemes? And if you see that, will he put more pressure on the ball, more pressure on passing lanes versus what he's doing currently? Offensively, are we going to see, depending on the players, are we going to see kind of more movement, more cutting in particular, which we're seeing cutting now, but how much, where are we going to kind of see that kind of thing, where it becomes more of a guards game than it is a front court game? And if you kind of start seeing that progress there, and at the same time, it's not having this feeling that every time there's a step, there's something that's positive, there's an automatic qualifier of negative. I mean, we had a double-digit win at Minnesota in a year that we're going to be really, it's going to be a blessing if we make 20 games, a 20-win season. That's something to celebrate. I was there when at the end of in Bob Knight's 1993-94 season, I watched him go up to the barn and get killed by 50. I was at the game. I was sitting in B-dubs watching him with a friend of mine. There's something to be said that, if you start kind of showing, like, let's say you go to Atlantis and you may not be winning games, but you're definitely taking them to the wire. That's progress. Especially because you were losing by 20, 30 points to UConn and Auburn. And, you start seeing games like that KU game, you can kind of start seeing it kind of pull out a little bit. And you kind of saw that with Tom Crean a little bit, in that what you're really looking for, I think, is that Tom Crean, after, that the year before they won the last Big Ten title under him. It was 2015. 2014, 2015 would be the year I'm thinking of, where they kind of limped into the tournament, but you kind of saw some hope that things, with a couple more dudes, you could have some really good teams. And the next year, they came out and won the Big Ten title. So I think a lot of it's just, and we'll be here to kind of, I'll be watching, because it's what I do. I love doing it. and talking about it. But it's like, we'll be kind of pointing out, I mean, what we see, and it's like, well, there's some hope here. There's some things happening there. So a lot of it's going to just be kind of breaking that down to that level, and hopefully, again, just have that expectation where it's like, it's not where you started, it's where you end up, and maybe see if that again, they could kind of just take another step in the positive direction.
Yeah, on my end, I would say that, I don't know if I really have anything quantitative to add, because I think I've already kind of bored people enough with the math tonight. I would say that you have to probably look at this in terms of like a stage of a trip. Mike Woodson, jumped in the cockpit of an Apache helicopter, which is like IU basketball. It's like a powerful gunship. He had all the resources, NIL, all that stuff behind him. And now, on part of this mission, it's now basically crashed. And probably may not be able to like get the helicopter back up going. So now you almost have to like think, okay, that's not going to be working. What I was trying to do before. Now what do I do with the parts I have? So you might have to go a little bit like a Rambo. It's like, okay, just take the chain gun off of the mount and just go and start. It's like, okay, I know it's like 30 miles that way. I'm gonna like go wipe out all the bad guys with this with this massive gun. I think you have to think of it that way, that, okay, I try to go out there and get as many of the traditional like 5-star recruits that are like NBA ready players that I thought I was going to be able to get perfect access to. But that's obviously not working. Now you have to think about it in terms of, okay, don't focus so much on, let's say, whether it's like stars or anything like that. Think about skill level in terms of particular skills. Think about like what Indiana State does, is that they're not trying to like win every single facet of the game. They're trying to be elite at 1 or 2 or 3 very specific facets of the game, and leveraging all of their strategy and tactics off of that. You might have to do something like that now, because your access to those pools of recruits may be clearly starting to wind down in terms of, like the top level, 5 stars. So you may have to start thinking about, okay, I have to get really like specific and granular. If I'm going to go after shooters, I have to really go after the best shooters. And I may have to make some sacrifices in other parts of their skill set. Maybe guys that aren't as athletic, or on like rim protection. You may have to take like really good athletes that maybe are not great at other facets of the of the game. But if you want rim protection, that may be what's available to you now. So you really maybe just have to really maximize on specific skill sets across your roster to really try to put something together that you can say, okay, I have skill here. It may not be like perfectly balanced, but at least I know I have like, something for every like facet of, to build something that is like workable. Because right now, I think trying to go forward with the plan that he had before, I don't know if that's going to be available now that the honeymoon is clearly over.
Guys, I appreciate that. I'm going to end with this. I'm disillusioned about the direction of the program. And I'm going to take it necessarily, it obviously my focus is on Coach Woodson. And I've said my piece about that. I will root for him to be successful. I want him to hit that 6-leg parlay, as we've now moved it to 6 legs instead of 5, with Liam's decommitment and information tonight. I hope he hits it, because it's Indiana basketball and we want it to move forward. And I'm not going to be one to root against, but I'm disillusioned, and it'll take a lot of juice to get me back to the energy level. I'll be here and I'll talk to you guys and I'll give you my analysis, but I think disillusioned is the term for me. And it goes to the hiring process. We swung and missed with Archie. I think we're in the middle of swinging and missing with Coach Woodson. And the challenge is, you don't hire your friends. You don't hire famous people who are alums. You hire good basketball coaches. And the challenge to the powers to be is, hopefully Mike Woodson can change and be a good basketball coach. Or when that is over, we have to go out and hire good basketball coaches and take whatever steps it needs to hire the best basketball coach to get Indiana back to consistent winning, not just making tournaments. I don't want to hear, oh, but so-and-so took us to a tournament. Indiana basketball's not making tournaments. It's getting to Sweet 16s and Final Fours and hanging banners. And if we can – maybe we can't get there anymore. And that's where my disillusionment is. But Liam McNeely's decommitment tonight hit like a brick. It hit me personally. I will take some time. And always any kind of adversity, there's opportunities to reinvest, and I will probably be reinvested as soon as I possibly can. But Coach Woodson has to do well, has to hit that parlay. We have to get back to winning consistently, and then when his time is done, we have got to get someone in here who is a complete package and do whatever it takes. We talk about NIL and getting the players in and doing whatever it takes to do that. All that's fine, but you need the lead guy to be consistently good. And we have had struggles for way, way too long. That falls on the series of athletic directors. That's on a few of the board of trustees right now. You have to look at the program as a whole, not just your micro wants or needs for personal ideas of who should be coaching the basketball program at Indiana University. So many sports are doing well at Indiana, and kudos to the athletic department for doing that. The basketball program for a lot of years right now has not been where it needs to be. And we all want it to win, and we all want it to be. But when you have this guy and several others who I think are like me disillusioned, there is a problem. There's a deep problem. That's not just a Mike Woodson problem. There's a deep problem with Indiana basketball. Has not been able to reestablish what it was when I grew up, when I went to college, and when I did those things. And I'm not clamoring for Bob Knight and all that. It's just good basketball by good leadership. It's time that Mike Woodson step up and be that leader if he gets more time, and if he can't, then the replacement needs to be found so Indiana basketball can get back, and the drama that we've had in the last 4 or 5 years needs to stop, and we can have consistent winning and consistent selection Sundays where we don't have to worry about anything or be disappointed or be in a laughing stock. And so with that,
that's it. We're done. No more questions.
We're done. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Thanks to Bob Thompson for producing our music, and thanks to John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing our logos. Thank you, listening. Thank you, Mike and Bob. And until then,
take it from me, Christian Wofford. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. Go Hoosiers.
Coach Tonsoni is always right about basketball.
We did it. We got
nice
damaging news right before the show, and I think we handled it pretty good. I'm pretty proud of that of what we did. Thank you guys. You guys were.
I like your delivery at the end, Coach. That was very good.
Yeah,
very well spoken and necessary.
Yeah. I love Indiana. I love everything about Indiana basketball. I got banners hanging down here. Yeah. I just one step ahead, 2 steps back, 8 guys in the portal.
Yeah.
It's time for that to end, and we need to do whatever it takes to get there.
Yeah, I think I was thinking today about like the fans, like you said, is that it's so strange to me that the fan base that you have that's still as loyal as they are shows up, donates, with all the NIL money and everything that you see that allows IU to be like the second most expensive brand in all of college basketball. That doesn't happen from like, big funders necessarily. It happens from like all the people across the state. And you experience all these kind of things that happen like today. And at the end of it, all the disappointment the fans are feeling, then they have to like log in and see that they're being blamed for what's happening in terms of like the bad events. And so that for me, like taking off my analytical hat and kind of putting my fan hat on, that's kind of stuff that definitely bothers me, is because I don't think this fan base deserves that, because they've stayed loyal in ways that I don't even know if like Kansas and North Carolina would like go through this kind of stuff over like 25 years and still just say, yeah, we're still showing up. We're still like, buying the stuff. So it's, so yeah, I agree. I'm glad you said what you said, because it was, it was definitely necessary and timely.
1,000%, Mike.
Thank
and,
you.
And agreed, with what Coach said there. And I want to kind of echo what Mike said about the fan support and blaming fans for this. You have bad actors. The internet's a horrible place and a wonderful place simultaneously. It's not, when we first, and anybody can have a voice and anybody can send a tweet, send a tweet out to somebody and rip into them. But at the end of the day, you got to, it's like saying, it's like you step in a mess on the floor and you're like, okay, that's what did it. It's destroying my life. The 800-pound gorilla is sitting in the corner. And you cannot just blame the mess that's been made without addressing the 800-pound gorilla, because at the end of the day, these kids, they are kids. And the other thing, don't tweet at recruits, don't tweet at your players, don't rip into them. Keep your toxicity. Don't yell at your dog, don't yell at your wife, don't yell at your kids. Find an outlet. Go hit golf balls, do something. But regardless, don't look at Hoosier Nation. We have several thousand people, 4,000 people we say on this right now. The vast
it's reading 7,880. I've never seen that number. Either we've hit the all-time record or it's just hitting on and offs. I don't know if it's recording on and offs, but we have 7,885 in the number.
We have another guest.
So almost 8,000. Hi, how are you?
Hey,
Jared Morris.
Almost 8,000.
You missed a hell of a show.
Almost 8,000 people logging in after this, after the roller coaster of not just this season but the last 36 hours. And
I heard we were bringing drinks.
You're blaming them.
Is that
we did? Yes, okay. We were bringing drinks. Yes.
All right, good.
Yep. The walker is out for me. So
it's been a night, Jared.
Yeah. We've
looking forward to the replay, gentlemen.
Hope
sorry it took me so long to get here.
No, don't worry about it. But
who told you about drinks?
Yeah,
you were putting the kids.
I was, but I was able to. We do meditations at the end of the night, so I was able to check Twitter. I saw Jen Gahn, Chat Mob Hall of Famer, who had retweeted, or somebody else, Denise or Desiree maybe retweeted "Coaches all of us," and had you like frame by frame taking shots of the Jack. So I was like, okay, guess I should bring a glass with me when I come.
Mike goes, I broke a cardinal rule. I never said I would drink on one of these, and I said, tonight, if there's going to be a night to do it, this is the night to break the rule.
7 episodes in, and we cracked Mike already.
No kidding. No, I just thought I had this really good banner moment. I come to an epiphany with the win last night and the news where, okay, enjoy it. Don't get caught up in all the drama. Be a fan. Do all those things. And I think I had a really nice banner moment written. And then 7:15, the news breaks. I'm going live at 7:30 with the bracketology. And so I didn't know. Told Amy, halfway through, I'm just going to say, screw it. It's kind of like Lee Corso when he threw that hat and said the F word, F it. I said, that's going to be me. I said, I'm going to bring props. I'm going to bring a beer and whiskey and just say, all right, we had a bad day. We'll talk about it. So I don't know. I hope people enjoyed it. We talked about it. We were honest without going ballistic. These two guys were great. I had
a feeling this was perfect timing for these two. Because, look, their research paints a very clear picture of the challenge that Indiana faces. And as Mike and I have talked about many times, that challenge now gets even harder with today's news. So, it is what it is at this point. Here we are.
Dean Wormer said it best, 0.0. That's where we are right now. We're Bluto Blatarski at this moment, and it's frustrating.
Yeah.
Yes.
Your thoughts, Jared, while we're on here?
Yeah.
We've all said our piece.
I haven't had much time to process this because I was at my daughter's open house. And then, I get back from the open house and I have like 1,000 text messages. And I'm like, what happened? I was like, we win last night. They make the announcement. I kind of thought we would settle into this kind of maybe calm period for a little while. No, not at all. And then I, see what happened. And then obviously, wasn't able to get on earlier. I don't know. I don't think you can be, and again, maybe you guys covered all this, so forgive me if I'm repeating stuff. I don't think you can be surprised. I mean, Liam McNeely is a top flight recruit. He plays a certain style. He's been in, 15th in mock drafts. He's probably only going to spend time in college for 1 year. I think if I was his parent, I would just say, are you sure? Maybe do you want to revisit this and just make sure that maybe you want to go to a more stable place when you have every option available to you? There's a lot to like about Indiana, but are you sure that's where you want to go? Given some of the instability and some of the, issues that we've talked about just with the offensive system. And we've been talking about that for 3 years. So it's not a shock, and that's really disappointing to say. I would like to be able to stand up with great pride and say everybody should want to come to Indiana and play basketball. And right now, I understand why people don't. I mean, that's just
fair.
A candid statement. I don't
That's
like
fair.
that. I don't like it at all. But I also, my perspective has changed on it a little bit since I've become a parent. I look at it a lot more through the parents' eyes now than the players, and I completely understand it. I don't think it's fan toxicity. I think there's a lot of other issues for it than that. I mean, as I've talked about, I have misgivings about the role that we played, and I think there's a way that fans could have been better. But that's not a reason a guy decommits. I mean, there's lots of basketball reasons for it to make sense. And there's lots of CYA reasons why people would want to blame it on fans. The fans were here before. A lot of the people who are running the program were here, and the fans are going to be here after. And so we always catch the flack. It's not that we can't be better. We can. I've had very candid conversations with people about how I think we should have been better this season. It's not why we lost Liam McNeely.
Yeah, one of the most common things I see whenever you get to like this stage where you start losing recruits, and again, it's not an IU related or IU specific problem, but yeah, there's always it's the fans' fault that we're losing recruits. I see it in SEC football. I see it in other college basketball programs. Everyone, like, if you're kind of on the side of like, yeah, you really like the coach and you're just like really trying to do what you can to support them, which obviously it's fine. There's always like a certain crew within that says, yeah, it's the fans' fault. It cannot be the coach's fault that we're in this state. So,
and even if you're the person who's basically going to be standing in front of Memorial or Assembly Hall with a picket sign in front of Dolson's window saying "Fire Mike Woodson," and you're going to hold a vigil there, you still should want IU to have a robust NIL. You should still want IU to land recruits. You should still want IU to be one of the top brands in college basketball. Because eventually everything comes to an end anyway. And when it's all said and done, when it's finally time for a coaching change, and whether it's in 13 months or beyond, you want to have something left. There is no logic in burning a village down to save it. And there is also, and I agree with I'll say it again, I agree with everyone that it's not the fault of anybody that's holding the picket sign, because they're holding a picket sign for a reason. And if you're attacking, if you're going and telling a kid whatever, that's sadly what the internet's kind of done to us. But I would just kind of go back to, yeah, it's okay. I get it. I get the anger. I get the frustration. I get this. But, there comes a point where it's like you kind of just have to realize that we still have something special here, because we're still here doing this, and we're going to be doing this. I don't see this going away. The Cubs fans waited a century. Red Sox fans waited nearly a century. I'm sorry, Red Sox fans. You guys, you guys almost waited a century, right, Jared? I mean, I'm a Reds fan. I mean, I remember, 1990. I remember a couple, near misses with Dusty Baker. You look at baseball, you look at any sports. I'm a Bears fan, so it's like, let me tell you, talk about misery. I give you the Chicago Bears every year. What we're going to trade up for now is, it's like, what are you going to do now with it? So, part of sports fandom is misery. It's kind of, and part of this is, but part of the fun is shared misery. We work through this together. These are group therapy sessions, and sometimes with whiskey. So it works. But that's kind of my thought. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's not that much to say about it, and I'm sure you guys spent 2 hours saying a whole lot of really insightful and great things, and I can't wait to listen to it. And at the end of the day, you just get to it, and it's like, I mean, I don't know. It's just very disappointing that we are where we are, and there's a lot of reasons why we're here, and it's difficult to see a path out of it right now, which is very frustrating.
Yeah, pundit drink. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a path out of it. That is a path to being distracted from it for an evening.
Kids, let me tell you something. Kids, let me tell you something. This isn't a solution.
Nothing is made better from alcohol. It just delays having to worry about it for a while. But
do we have to mark it explicit now? The podcast.
I don't know. I don't know what you guys said before I was here.
We didn't cuss. We just talked about.
Hey, Mike go on an expletive-filled rant?
Yeah, exactly.
He'd be the one. He was really the one that you need to worry about.
Did he add an adjective between sweet and spot that I wasn't aware of?
Mike, quick HR question for you. I haven't asked you one in a while.
Yeah.
Mike, if I don't answer my phone for 48 hours and HR is calling me in, does that mean they can still have a conversation with me? Isn't there like a window they can only call me? If I don't check my email, if I just shut it off or something?
Yeah, I think if you could just go into hiding for long enough, they'll lose interest. So
Chuck Roberts has left the building. Good to see you all.
All I will say is this: I do think we're in kind of an interesting spot as we come toward the end of the season. There has been a lot of public toxicity, and a lot of it is online. And so it's kind of the very online portion of the fan base that sees it and participates in it. And, I live 1,000 miles away, so most of my Indiana interaction is online. And so that is the IU world to me. I don't really know what it looks like to people who live in Bloomington, live in Indiana, and aren't online all the time. I don't know what that experience is like. I think it's fair to say, after a season like this, there's nothing wrong with a little self-reflection. I'm thinking about, okay, did I need to say that publicly? Could I have handled this differently? Could I have delayed saying this for a couple of weeks? We talked about this on our show. I think we could have, saved some of the stuff we said on the state of the program for 3 weeks while the season is going on. I don't think any of that stuff is out of bounds. But I think as IU fans, self-reflection doesn't mean you need to let yourself get raked over the coals and be blamed for something that's not your fault. Those are two extremely different things. This fan base's willingness to continue to show up and support and buy the narratives that we're given and buy the goals that we're given that were about championships, when it's clear that things are prioritized over winning, I mean, what do you expect from a fan base when that happens? Galen talks about this all the time on Crimson Cash. You keep promising the fan base something and then not following it up with your actions. People get frustrated by that. So we can all self-reflect and maybe find a better balance of what we say publicly and privately, but I mean, blaming the fans for this is like blaming Peyton Sparks' free throw percentage for this season being bad. Like, could it have helped things? Yeah, we probably could have made a small difference around the margins. It wasn't anywhere near the centerpiece of what the problem is, and so that's, I think, an important point for everybody to take, because this fan base has a lot to be proud of for how they've supported without that support being, returned back. And so I just think that's important, because that's what's keeping this program afloat. And if it goes away, and at some point it might, we're all getting older. A lot of us who remember the fumes of the Bob Knight era, which is kind of what I was brought up as, my favorite teams are 92 and 93. They didn't hang a banner, and the people who came after that didn't even get to experience that. So I understand, where fans get frustrated and just feel like they're being kicked in the face over and over again. So let's all do what we can to be better, but don't let anybody tell you that you're the problem, because that is not true.
every fan base though too with the social media. I just did this interview with this Iowa fan for Delphi Bracketology, and he was talking about the struggles that their fan base has, and now the low attendance and things like that, when really they've been in the top half of the Big Ten. And he was saying they need to look at the big picture and everything. So you have the Kentucky fans calling that official 5 years ago and trying to ruin his business on Yelp. It is Indiana because we're in that Indiana bubble. But it is also every fan base with the availability of social media to be a little negative, but it's just that. I just don't think any fan base is the reason why things happen on or off the court. If you're looking at between Indiana and Kansas and I'm sure you can find social media that's really toxic from Kansas and everywhere else. If you're making your decision based on that, you're not going to have too many opportunities to go to college or go to the pros or go to anywhere anymore. It's just a toxic place anyway. So I don't buy that argument either, that it's the fans or things of that nature.
Mike,
we should let Mike go to the sweet spot of his bed and pillow because.
Good night, Mike.
I had a good time.
Yep.
Great seeing everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike, we'll be in touch, brother. Always good to talk to you, man. Always.
Take care, man. See ya.
So
I'm excited to listen back to this.
I'm gonna share a small anecdote because we call this the After Hours segment, and
is this After Dark? It's 10
After
o'clock.
Dark.
Yeah,
sure.
Close enough. 11 here. So when I was doing the thing, the year I was student body president, walking through the parking lot of the IMU, and I look up, see an old high school friend who's got a friend of hers who was significantly taller, played basketball for IU, guy by the name of Andre Patterson. Oh. So we meet, and I say, hi, how you doing? Hug my friend, shake Andre's hand, and she goes, he's student body president. And he just looks at me and goes, man, I don't know how you handle that. And I looked at, and I didn't, this is one of the rare times where you actually, don't say the silent part, or, I kept the silent part really well bottled. I thought, dude, when I screw up, Wiemuth sends me a crappy email. When you screw up, you literally have 18,000 people wanting your head live and at home about 500,000 that are basically wondering why you're even in an IU uniform. Because, he was much maligned, I felt, as an IU player, and I feel guilty about, some of the thoughts that I had when he was playing. A lot of it was no fault of his own when we look back, thanks to Galen's video. But, you kind of think about this from a standpoint of the pressure that's on a player is everywhere, and they put that pressure upon themselves. I think the reason I'm kind of sharing that is more of a, it's just part of the drill is that you're going to have fans that are going to react poorly. And IU fans have not always reacted well when things have gone bad over the years. Mm-hmm. But usually it was confined to your living room or your basement or your den or the bar at the Elks Club, where you have 5 guys who think like you, and it doesn't really matter what you say because you're just bar talk amongst a bunch of old dudes that hang out together. And now it's changed because it gets amplified through this process. And it's not we have something special. And a lot of it comes down to, the pressure, these guys feel it because it's their lives. And it's also their livelihood in many respects. You look at a guy like, these guys are these guys want to make a living playing basketball, and they may be making a living in this country or someplace else, but they're trying to hone their skills, and they're elite at what they do. If you're playing Division I basketball, you're an elite player, period. If you're playing college basketball, you're an elite player of this game. Not the elite of the elite yet, but you're damn good at what you do. There's nobody sucks anymore is what I'm trying to say. Nobody sucks anymore. There's too much being put into it. Go to any sportsplex this weekend. Just walk in, drive by the sportsplex, see how many cars are parked out there. Pay your $8, go in and watch how many kids are fulfilling their version of hoop dreams out there, and think how few of them are actually going to ever play college basketball.
Yeah.
Even high school.
I know.
That's hard. Coach, how many times did you cut a kid that you thought, man, if I was at a different school, this kid would be probably starting for me? You know what I
cut a kid?
Yeah, there would be a time when
start somewhere else.
Yeah,
I didn't have that much talent.
Okay, fair enough.
I had some tough. you're from Columbus North. I'm from the single A, double A, where you just want to you got to get someone off the farm to come in and set screens.
True. And that's my point. Yeah. And there are times where it's like, you look at kids and you're going, if this kid were at one of our county schools, they'd be starting as a sophomore. Yeah. And they're not playing.
It was the other way around. I was looking at some of the kids that were cut at Huntington North or something, and boy, they would play for me. That was the way I looked at
Fair
it.
enough.
The small school stuff.
Yeah.
No, good show tonight, Jared. It was really good. Mike and Bob kept a real analytical approach on how we needed to do it, and
I mean, look, it's important.
I'm pretty proud of that. It was a tough day, and it could have gotten off the rails. I don't think we were even close to that. I thought we just actually talked about the seriousness. It's a hole. We mentioned that it's a 6-leg parlay that we got to bounce out. We used that reference, and so. I'm just really proud of what we tried to do today. I didn't know. I had like 20 minutes to really process it after the first podcast I was on, and I really wasn't sure how to do it or where to go, and I'm pretty proud of the three of us for just handling it. I hope people will agree that it was respectfully done and not shock talk, scream and yell and shout at the moon type of stuff. So
that was my hypothesis. And then when you get a decommitment like Liam, everybody immediately wants their red meat. But Bob and Mike's are fully cooked meals, fully cooked 3-course meals with great analysis.
Thank you.
And look, it's as we've said, the decision's made. Woodson's coming back. I'm an IU fan. I'm going to support it. And I really have spent a lot of time thinking about how can we be better maybe than how we handled it this season. I have some regrets about things that we did. I think we can be better, all of those things. And I think those are all, fair. But it's also fair to say what Indiana has now signed itself up for is a remarkable challenge. And we've got to remember that. Now this is still the same program that promises championships, so you still have to. I mean, I don't know what to do with standards and expectations now, honestly. I suppose we'll be debating that, as we go forward. But I think it is important to understand the gravity of the challenge that is in front of this program, not just for next season, but in terms of building a foundation. And I think you can do two things at once. You can do your best to support and try and improve the way that you provide that support, while also being very clear-eyed about how hard this is going to be. And how unlikely it's going to be.
It's fair enough also to think that anytime you go into a change of coaching, it's you're looking at a gamble, and the payoff is very rarely actualized. Think of how few teams have won a national title, and we talked about this on one of the assembly call, private ones that we did for the season. When you look at the number of national champions, you look at the number of programs. I mean, Purdue fans right now are looking at their chops. We think we're hungry. The last time they were in a Final Four, I was in preschool.
I wasn't born.
Yeah, Jared wasn't even on the planet. Coach, at that point, weren't you in your 14th year up at Delphi or something? Or Western.
What was it, 80?
No. It was 80, so I mean, you're not that far off of me. I know you joke about how old you are. You're not, you're not that old, partner. But no, I mean, in 80,
I was an 8th grader.
So you were an 8th grader. So you were this proud middle schooler. I'm sitting there doing nursery rhymes, and Jared his parents are thinking about what to name him when he comes. That's a long time. And you talk about the Iowa fans. Guess who was there with them in their last Final Four? Iowa. They were there together in Market Square Arena.
Oh, wow, I didn't even realize. Was that who was the coach there at Iowa? That wasn't Dr.
Lute?
Tom, was it?
Was it Lute Olson?
Oh, was it Lute? Yeah, I think you're right.
I think Lute Olson was coaching, and Katie wasn't even the coach. I think it was the other guy, the guy right before him that went to someplace else.
Wasn't it
was
Rose?
Mike Rose. Yeah, it was Rose. It was Rose.
I don't know his first name.
Was it Mike Rose? We're gonna say Mike for now because we're at 2 hours and 13 minutes.
It was Coach Rose.
Coach Rose. Coach Rose.
It was Coach Rose.
And Louisville wins it with Denny Crum against the Larry Brown coach team. Larry Brown coached UCLA team. That was that Final Four, first one on Market Square. So Lee Rose, thank you, Jim Wyatt. You are my
the man.
You are my hero.
Lee Rose.
Hero.
Lee Rose. Lee. So yeah, I mean, there are lots of fan bases with good basketball team with proud traditions that would kill even for what we had the last 20, 25 years in many respects. So let's kind of look at it that way. I mean, have we heard from UTEP recently?
Yeah. By the way, Mike says lowering expectations is not the answer.
I agree, Mike.
I agree.
1,000%.
I agree.
1,000%.
To be fair, it would not be us lowering the expectations. Like, there were, and I guess, this is the point I think that we made all along when we talked about, what's the opportunity cost of bringing Mike Woodson back? It is, you guys probably talked about this. I'm sure Mike talked about this. It's the potential of a new coach with a new honeymoon period where you can really kind of get things ramped up. And it would be much easier to have higher expectations for that historically than what we're facing now. Right. So it wouldn't be us lowering the expectations. It would be us lowering the predictions, I guess, like what's reasonable to predict would happen. The expectations, the standard has to somehow stay constant, or we're never going to get there. And that's kind of the hard place that Indiana fans have been in. It's like, man, I just want to support the players. This is what's frustrating. Like, I want to show up for the games and support the players and just be happy if they win, and not be so worried about here's, the context and okay, yeah, you won, but now you're only 17-13. Woohoo. We're celebrating a win over Minnesota. It's like, okay, whatever. It was a really good win. They played well for that game, and I want to just be able to support them and do that. But the rest of the season obviously hasn't been up to the standard that we expect. And this, I think, is the frustration for fans, is you're staring directly down the barrel of another season that actually seems to have a lower floor than this one. It's like, man, I mean, that's just a tough thing to continue to ask people to show up and have that genuine level of support for. I think we have to do it the best we can. But I don't know. It gets hard after a while.
It does get hard. It does. I mean, I wish Cowboy Bob was coming back too. I miss the cartoons, man. I mean, you don't see cartoons at 7:00 in the morning. Maybe MeTV runs them, just so you guys know. Bob. You know who I'm talking about, Bob. Brian. You know who I'm talking about.
Oh man.
Hey, I gotta get caught up on this bracketology stuff here, and I'd love talking to you guys. I could talk to you guys all night.
We will do it again soon.
And
Janie, thank you. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I would take the women's basketball success for the men's team. Absolutely. I mean, that team.
Actually, that's a hell of a point, because you really think about it. We got a baseball team that's looking really good. We got Coach Sig in the football program, and Terry Morin. Let's spend our March on focusing on Terry Morin and what the women are doing. I mean, they're a special group of ladies. This is a special team to watch play. They're fun to watch, and
their first Big Ten tournament game is tomorrow.
Yeah.
So let's flush all of this tonight and focus on them tomorrow. Show up for Senior Day on Sunday. Support the players for Senior Day. See what happens in the Big Ten tournament. I mean, look, that's part of what I hope Assembly Call Radio can sometimes do, is be a cathartic place where we can all get out some of these thoughts and then show up fresh-minded for the actual games. Because the players are still playing hard. The men, the women, all the sports. They deserve the support. Frustration with the coach should not prevent you from supporting the players on the court. So
well said.
That's
well done.
That's certainly my focus moving forward.
All that.
All right, I'm going to end this.
I think they've gotten enough show.
Exactly. 2 hours and 17 minutes.
Lawrence,
I told Amy, Jared, I said, hey,
Lawrence of Arabia.
This is going to be the shortest show ever. I'm going to make sure it's an hour. I'm in charge.
Dude,
Bad news, too much drama.
Oh, no.
It's going to be an hour.
Saying that.
2:18.
Then Omar Sharif shows up. I mean, we are at the runtime of Lawrence of Arabia. I swear to God, we're at the runtime of Lawrence of Arabia. The director's cut even.
Oh, jeez. All right. Ending the audio tape now and ending you guys live now, too. Good night, everybody.